Hello and welcome back to the Sideline Live Podcast. You may have noticed that I've been gone, and I have been, but I was busy working on the Paralympics and the Olympics, and even got the chance to go to Paris. But more about that later. I had a brilliant time, but I'm really excited to bring back the podcast. I have loads of athletes and coaches lined up, and I'm looking forward to get stuck in over the months ahead. I'm Orla Keeling, and what I want to do is to go beyond the highlights and the big days to find out what it really takes to make it to the top of your game. I'm going to talk to people about their passion, their challenges, and the mindset that drives success. Okay, delighted to be joined by Jacqui Hurley. Jacqui, thanks for joining the podcast.
No bother, thanks for having me.
I was looking through kind of notes and listening to podcasts you've done before, and I was like, where do I start? But I had written down a number of roles that you've had, and it's like you're an athlete, you're a coach, presenter, radio host, newsreader, water girl, coach, mum, sister, auntie. Who are you, Jacqui? And give you the space to say who you are rather than introducing yourself, rather than me introducing you.
Yeah, I guess all of those things are probably fair and accurate description. It's just trying to be all of those things at the one time is probably the key. You know, I guess a lot of people probably see you on the telly or they hear you on the radio. And, I think a lot of people feel they know a piece of you, but it's actually trying to be all of those things to all of those people. I would probably say the balance isn't always perfect because it's hard to juggle all of those balls, but I'm quite happy in all of those facets to be described as any one of a number of those things.
Is there anything you haven't done yet and you want to achieve?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. To be honest, the book was a big thing for me with Girls Play 2. A lot of people would have said to me over the years, oh, there's a book in you, you'd love to do a book. And I probably did, but it has to be the right book. That's probably the way I always felt. I would never have written a book that I wasn't passionate about. That just wouldn't interest me. Lots of people had approached me over the years and asked me, would I write their autobiography or would I do something about a particular sport or something like that? That never appealed to me. But what really did was keeping girls active in sport is probably my biggest passion outside of my actual general work. And so to me, it was kind of like finding a passion project that would marry those things that are really, really important to me. And that's when Girls Play 2 came about. So that's probably the thing that if I was pulling on another strand, I'd love to have something that moves those girls into their teenage years and see if we could do something for them. That's probably the next thing that's on my horizon. And then I guess it's kind of away from the job. What do you do? I kind of dabble in some other stuff around and I'm interested in other stuff that's not just sport. And so I guess it's just trying to make sure that you have enough fulfillment that at some point when somebody hits pause on this and people have decided they've had enough of Jacqui Hurley, that maybe I have something else to move on to as well.
There's a few is it High Rocks you're into now, is it?
Yeah, there is. So I'm doing one in Malaga this weekend, actually. So I guess for me, it was kind of how do I scratch a competitive itch? I obviously still play competitive sport. I still play basketball. I had played Gaelic football up until this year, but I'm definitely drawing a line in the sand on that one. I've just found the move from hard ground to the pitch is just not, I can't do it anymore. But High Rocks has definitely been a nice thing to step into. I'm doing it with my husband, so pray for the marriage and that we're still talking to each other after it. But I do think it's nice for us to be able to have something that still allows us to be competitive, but it's a bit of crack as well. Well, that's the way I hope it'll be.
Talk us through a little bit your relationship with sport, because you grew up an excellent athlete, and even until now, and I know you spoke previously about finding your tribe a bit in Crokes, and I know you're still involved there, but even you're saying now High Rocks and stuff, as a really competitive person, and I know you had a big injury when you were younger, just the relationship with sport away from the job for a moment, and as a competitor, how do you find the evolution of that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it was kind of all I knew. I was in one of those families where we were just regularly thrown in the back of the car, went off to sport, whatever it was. We had a big 7-seater car where there'd regularly be other people's children in the car. Mom and dad would be always at the game. There was never a reason that they wouldn't be there, unless they were working or something. But generally, they were at all the games. And a lot of it was because they were involved, which kind of made it nice that like they made such an effort to be there for us. And that's why it just became such a normal thing. Like that's why when people see me on a sideline with my children, it's just so normal because that's what I grew up having. And I would love for them to pass that on to their children and likewise, because I do think there's something in that family connection that everybody gets something about it. So like even our chats around the dinner table are, hey, Luke, how'd you get on with hurling? Or Lily, what was your soccer match like? You know, we're all just invested in it. And it's not invested in it in a winning capacity. Like there's a big difference between that. My mom and dad never cared whether I won or lost. They just cared that it was quality time, that they were there with me, they enjoyed it, and I had fun. And that's probably what my initial relationship with sport was. That said, I'm an incredibly competitive person, probably too competitive. And a lot of my friends who play with me and know with me, or referees who have to referee me on a regular basis, would probably still say there is a point at which I definitely tip over the edge. And I recognize that it's something that in my 41 years in this life, I have definitely not found the perfect balance on. But I think that's good too. And I think it's important that, you know, there's a lot of talk now around kids and should they be competitive, should they not? Kids know if they've won or lost. Like I can play outside on the road with my 8-year-old daughter and she knows if she's won or lost a game because it's ingrained in their minds about winning and losing. They get it. And I've always had that. And I've always leaned into it and found it as a way to kind of push myself. So yes, the job is a big part of it. But even without the job, I would still be as involved in sport as I am now, even if it wasn't the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I find it funny. I remember I used to be a Go Games ref like most kids in Ireland, getting a bit of pocket money. And I remember like kids coming up to me like, what's the score? And I'm like, I'm not keeping score. And it was funny. I think now, and it's like, I wonder was that more, and why they implemented it, is it more for the coaches rather than the players? Because then if there's no score, the coaches won't start just leave a load of kids on the side. And
totally.
You know, and I just think I think there's a great line. It's like sometimes parents ruin kids' sport because you just see them get too competitive. But
totally,
there is a balance to be found with it, I think. But as you say, like all the kids know the score.
100%. Come here, they're doing it in the yard every day. They know, they come home. Oh, like Luke was like, I scored this unbelievable bicey, you know, and I was like, oh, brilliant. Like, you know, but he knows that it amounted to them winning. I don't have to tell him that. But I do think it is important as well, though. Like I coach kids as well. I coach both of my kids. So I see it on the sidelines. And I do have, you know, some parents where they really want to get involved and maybe they think that their child's level is above or below what the child thinks. But the child generally knows. If you, particularly like, let's say with a child, if you ask them whether they see themselves as an A, B, or a C player, generally they'll know whereabouts they sit because kids are actually very good at seeing it. It's really the parents is generally where the problem is. So I do try to observe that and understand that, listen, their kids' games, let them play, but they'll find the rules themselves. You can bet your bottom dollar.
Yeah, and it's funny, I don't think we don't ask kids enough about, and I did a thing with a team before and like some of the coaches didn't get it, some of the girls didn't get it, but I was like, why do you play? And I actually found the reasons why they played. And it was like, well, no one ever bothered asking them before. And then if they're dropping out or they're not enjoying it, how do you know why they're there? Like some of them are there to be competitive and to go on and play for their county, but some of them just want to have the crack with their mates.
Totally. And you need to be able to facilitate both of those things. But you're right. Asking kids how they feel is the most important thing. And even as you go up the levels, like even now, I still think it's important to say what went well there. What did you enjoy? What didn't you enjoy? Is there anything we can improve? Because kids will give you direct, honest feedback. And it's only at some point where people say you can't speak and we try to silence people. That's when the feedback stops. But I work with an adults ladies football team now, and I trust me, when you ask them for an opinion, they'll give it to you. But I still think it's important that you ask the question, because otherwise, why are we working in an echo chamber where nobody does that? I think feedback is the most important thing we can do. And that goes for the professional part of my job as well, as opposed to just the sport. I think you have to ask for feedback, but you have to be willing to take it too.
You've been involved within your professional role in so many events and met so many athletes. Has that shaped the way you now coach your kids or the adult team?
Yeah, it probably has, but like in a way that's indirect, if that makes sense. So you observe behaviors and you know what you like and what you don't like, and you can see it in a professional capacity. The whole coaching game has changed now. You know, it's so much more player led. Lots of people try to put structures in place that allow players to succeed, but a lot of people try to hand ownership over. But you still see with a lot of coaches, there's only so far that goes. Some people still want to be responsible for every single element of it. I have definitely leaned into the professional side of it over times where I've seen certain things and thought, I really like that, I'll definitely use that. But equally, some of it is actually just what's the enjoyment of it. You know, what do you observe when you sit back and you realize how much you love sport? It also makes you want to be involved. So like when you're there in a, let's just say an opportunity came up to get involved in an All-Ireland final. So if that in a professional capacity is all you ever dreamed of when you're coming through the ranks, you're like, I'd love to be involved in an All-Ireland final. That would be incredible. I did that on radio for 14 years of All-Ireland finals. But it was a long time for me to get back down onto the touchline like I did last year with Kilmacud. And suddenly you're back down involved in it and you see it like you're eyeballing people on the pitch. It does probably make you appreciate what you see from the top tier in Croke Park as well, that all those little moments in a match of what's happening here or what's happening here. There's definitely reverse learnings from both of those that I probably would have taken for granted. But now in 2025, I probably have a different perspective again. And maybe that's going to constantly evolve, but I definitely got a lot from last year.
Was there anything you've observed over the years in terms of coaches interacting with players on match day that really struck a chord, whether positive or negative?
Yeah, both actually, I would say. A lot of the negative interactions I would see where maybe this is just because I have worked with people from very young ages. I've worked with people who are just club players, kids, you know, that kind of stuff. I've worked with county players, international players, adult club county players, you know, so you see it at all the different levels. And the one thing I will say with every player is they are different and every player should be treated differently. It is very hard for management teams now, particularly in amateur setups where they might have to deal with 40 players to be able to speak to 40 players differently. But I know for sure I was a certain player who liked to be spoken to. I liked to get honest feedback of go away, do this, do this, do this. I've seen some players who just don't take that well and they need to be built up. Like we've had people that I've worked with over the years who only want the positive. They don't want to be told, you know, you didn't do that well, or don't kick here, or don't do this. They want to be told, do. And you need to know that. Like I started keeping a notebook about certain players and how they like to be spoken to, what they like to be done, because you need to be able to refer to that. If you're dealing with 40 players, you can't treat them all the same because they're not the same. Not only are they different ages, they're different physical types, they are mentally wired differently. You need to be able to understand that. So I've definitely observed negative interactions where I have seen coaches letting rip at a player who I know they're not going to respond well to that. But I have also seen players really responding to coaches where they have actually found a groove that really works. And knowing and watching that is something incredibly special where you see, like, you know, that if you've got the best player in Ireland, you know that they're going to deliver, but it's actually, how do I find that extra 3 or 4% out of them? How do you make somebody like David Clifford even better on an All-Ireland final day? And only the very, very best coaches can get that extra bit out of their players.
So is the key thing in getting that 3-4%, is it the relationship that you build?
To me, it is. Yeah. Like I just would have found over the years that there are certain players who need more from you. Some players you can rock up, you can see them, you know, have private chats maybe twice a year. Some players won't ever do that. Some players will be on the phone to you every single day if they thought they could get away with it. So you have to find a balance of what do you think works with that, and observe and say, is that player getting better by having those chats with me, or am I holding them back? Am I giving them too much? Maybe I'm too much in their head and maybe they need to work this out for themselves. But actually, the more I get involved with teams and realize like what players need what, you find the balance. And that's actually when you recognize they're getting better. This is really good. This is really, really helping them. And if it's a player, like we would have a lot of players who maybe have something personal that they want to talk to you that's nothing to do with football, but actually helping them with a personal issue can really drive what happens to them on the pitch then, because they feel more safe, they feel more secure, and they know that you have their back, and they're playing better football because you're looking after them in life too. And I know that sounds desperately cliched, but actually the holistic approach of what some of the best coaches in Ireland do is the very reason why those athletes are performing at the top level.
Someone gave me a line before, Donny Fox, and I can't remember the exact line. I should have wrote it down, but he said, all the team wants is for someone that they trust that will know they'll show up every week and they'll feel safe in the environment.
Sure, what more can you want out of a coaching environment? Like he's absolutely right, because if you try to overcomplicate it, then you're going to lose people. But actually, the more you can bring people on the journey, tell them at the start, this is what we want to do. We're going to try to win this. We're going to try to win this, but we're going to try to get 40 players to come from this level to this level. And here's how we're going to do it. And once you lay out the roadmap, you're either in or you're out. And if you're in, I'll do anything for you. And like, that's probably the way I'd feel even now. And anyone I've ever coached or anyone I've ever worked with, and even in a professional capacity, I don't think there'd be many people who would say, I couldn't pick up the phone to her and ask her that. Lots of people would ring me about different things, about, I've got this issue in work, or I'm doing this or whatever. I'd like to think that having an open-minded and open conversation is where it all starts.
I will draw upon your coaching experience, but also your professional experience. You've observed top athletes for, I would say, probably 2 decades now. Like, what separates the greats, the best we've ever had or produced in the country, whether at county, Olympic, whatever? What separates the great ones from the rest?
It's what they do when no one's watching. Like, that's the key. Like, that old saying of like, abs are made in the kitchen and defined in the gym or whatever. Like, that's what the reality is. Like, half of it is, do they get their nutrition right? Do they get their recovery right? Do they study, at night? Do they watch video? What do they do? Because like, yeah, like, how many players have we seen over the years where even when you were younger, somebody was an absolute star and you thought, he's the next deal or she's going to be the next big thing, and they're unbelievably talented, but they never made it. And a lot of the reason they don't make it is because they're not willing to put in that extra work. Like, it's just champions do more. Like that's the reality. That's why they're at the very, very top. Like, it's funny because a lot of the pundits I would work with now, when you're having the cups of tea when you're working afterwards and you say, what about such and such, or what about such and such? And they all talk to you. One of the most common things that I see with a lot of our pundits who played at the very, very top of their game is a lot of them would say to me, they were not the most talented player in their group, that there was way more people who were more talented than them and probably should have made it, but they outworked them. I remember there was a documentary Tommy Bowe did a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember it, with Niall Moyna. And Niall Moyna went into their house, and obviously he studied the family, and everybody in the family had their own career. The parents, both of his siblings, they were all incredibly talented, all international athletes, all brilliant. But when he broke it down, Tommy was actually the one who was the least likely to succeed. Now, Hannah was playing hockey with the Irish team at the time and it was given, but his brother was actually the one that they had identified, had all the natural talent and all the abilities. And he actually had probably the least interest in it and just didn't, not that he didn't care, but like, the point is, what they found was science will tell you something, but your aptitude to do it is actually going to tell you the rest. And that's really where it is. Like, to me, all top level athletes, they have it up here. It's not really what the talent is. It's actually, are they willing to drive themselves to a point that nobody else is? And that's really, like, whether it's in a professional capacity or in a playing capacity or in a coaching capacity, it's those people who will do more that will find that that's why they succeed.
When I ask you that same question but about a team, what separates the All-Ireland champions, the really great teams, the best of all time, people will say, what is it then when you observe the group, not just the individuals?
Yeah, well, collectively, they have to do it together. The thing is, there's no point in, if you're going to be the best team, let's say the Limerick Hurlers, if the Limerick Hurlers are going to be defined as a generational team, it can't just be because Cian Lynch was a wizard with the hurley. It can't be one person. It has to be a set of standards that are maintained by everybody. And you do need a John Kiley figure who it actually makes sense that a lot of these people are teachers, like, Joe Schmidt, Declan Kidney, a lot over the years where they would have been very successful, because there is a leader at the top who people will listen to. They're an authoritative figure who speak, and people generally say, he knows best or she knows best, and I'm going to listen to that person. That happens. But also there is a requirement that when a teacher speaks in the room, they're speaking to 30 people in a classroom, 40 people on a pitch, whatever it is. If there is buy-in from every single person to do 2% more, then imagine what all those 2% together can do. The same token goes, if in one of those environments you have one person who starts sucking that negative energy out of you, that can really filter through a team so badly. And I have seen so many brilliant teams fade because one person got pissed off and they weren't the star that they were on the team, and it has a negative impact on everyone else. How the principal at the top of that game manages all of that is actually so crucial to success. And you see it all the time. I think the hardest part about coaching and teams is managing the evolution while also being in the revolution, right? So like you need to win, but you also need to find somebody every year. And that's why the Limerick Hurlers to me have been that epitome of it over the last number of years, where they've constantly just added one layer, one person, one. It's not like here's 5 extra players every single year. It's actually, how do I just add one person who is going to make this environment better? And I think that's the key thing to focus on when you are with a group. It's like, how do I just make this better in a small incremental way?
And I think that's what Dublin did. You know, you look at that evolution from 2015 to 2019, you can include 2020 in that as well. Like obviously you had the mainstays, you know, Brian Fenton, Stephen Cluxton, but then you look at adding Con O'Callaghan and then exploding onto in that final, Niall Scully, Brian Howard. They never settled and they kept going. And I met Jim in Belfast and I asked him, I didn't say what was his regret, but I kind of said, was there anything you would have done differently or any big kind of something you didn't get to achieve? And he said, the thing I always think about is the players I didn't maximise and I didn't get the best set of them. And he says, that's on me. And he named a couple like Emmett O'Keneal and a couple of different people that probably would have been dubbed as or touted as kind of players that to watch and to look for, and I didn't get the most out of it. When I asked Cliona O'Connor that question about what separates the best from the rest, she said, do you make it easy for the people around you to be brilliant? And I'd love to know, Jacqui, is there any athlete that has gone underrated in terms of just elevating a level of their team and they just haven't maybe got the recognition just from what you've seen? And I appreciate that's a specific question now as well.
Yeah, well, do you know what? The one that over the years that I always say, and I know he got the glory for being the most gifted footballer of all time, but I actually don't think anybody really had an appreciation for Colm Cooper in the way he transformed his game. Like to me, when my kids say to me, you know, like, oh, who's the greatest footballer you've ever seen? And a lot of people reach for Brian Fenton now and say he's going to be remembered as an all-time great, which he will. James McCarthy, like some of the Dublin footballers of this generation have been absolutely incredible. But people have to remember, Colm Cooper went from being a corner forward who worked off limited ball and managed to score some of the most outrageous scores of all time with like multiple people dragging out of him. Then blanket defenses came in. He found a way to do that. But his most important role of all to me was when they started moving him to centre forward and he started bringing other people into the game. There might have been games there where he scored 1 point and people would say, God, Colm Cooper was very quiet today. But he probably set up 1-7, 1-8 because he played other people into the game. And actually, that's what it's making. Like we have a general rule in our group is make your teammate look good. Because if your teammate gives you a crap pass and you don't bother your arse to chase it and you throw your arms up at them, yeah, you're annoyed, but they're annoyed because you didn't try hard. And then there's 2 pissed off people. Whereas if they kick a bad ball and you bust your gut to go and get it, and then they put up their hand to you and they say, really sorry about that. That was a crap ball, but thanks, you had my back. Then there's 2 really happy people who are working very hard for each other. And Colm Cooper, the way he transformed his game, I don't think he ever got the credit for that because I think all people saw was, oh, sure, they're ruining football now. Look at these blanket defenses. People like Colm Cooper can't even get the ball inside in the full forward line. But he recognised, I can't keep playing this game of football this way because it's not going to work. Kerry won't win All Irelands anymore doing this. And yes, there's massive change happening in Gaelic football now, but we've already had massive transitional change over the years. And I still think, I mean, I don't think I've ever even said this to him, but I still think to me, he'll be remembered as maybe the greatest of all time because of how he managed to adapt his game. I think he's just incredible.
I loved watching him growing up, and this is coming from a diehard Dub, and I still would just watch him. But like, even as you say there, like it's like what got you there won't get you here, and he recognised the evolution because he would have been gone, and he would have been
totally,
but he wouldn't have been playing. But like, it's the players that unlock the rest of the team is what I look for. Like Noel Healy, I used this with an underage team before. They're going into some competition, went down and had a chat with them, and I was like, Noel Healy won Player of the Match in the 2017 All-Ireland final. She didn't score. She held the ball for less than 2 minutes. I said, how long do you think she had the ball in a 60-minute game? It's like less than 2 minutes, player of the match. And you just see some of the kids go, and they're starting to kind of trickle it in. What's the biggest thing we're not teaching kids in sport?
Do you know what? It's funny because that is actually that role that you talk about that Noelle did for so many years. And like, I would still argue she could have probably done it for longer. I mean, she was just like outrageously good. But clearly, when you're a doctor and you have everything else going on, maybe it's not easy to do that. But I actually think the underrated value of somebody like that is a hard sell in a team, because I think particularly with kids, they either, well, first of all, there's a massive amount of them now want to be a goalkeeper because of the new rules, which is fascinating in itself. One of the others is they all want to score. They all want to be like, they want the glory of it all. They want to be in there. They want to mix it up. They want to be David Clifford. They want to be Con O'Callaghan. I totally get that. But actually, having somebody who you probably didn't even see Noelle Healy kick the ball that much. She just ran a lot. She probably covered 8-10K a game, up and down, more hand passes than kick passes. It might not have been the most beautiful art of football, but actually it's that coveted role of who is the most important player on the team. And I would argue on those years, the two most important people on that Dublin team when they won all those All-Irelands were Sinead Goldrick and Noelle Healy, because of that running role that both of them adopted. And I think it's very hard to show that to kids, because apart from being the link player, there's very little evidence afterwards. Like, what are you going to show me? Show me their GPS stats. They're absolutely wrecked. They covered 10K. They didn't score. It doesn't sound like it's the most glorious thing, but actually being that key player on a team and being the one that they all, if you asked any of those players on the Dublin team, who would they have put first on the team sheet? I guarantee you it would be one of those.
And I think both of them should, and hopefully, go down as two of Dublin's greatest ever for those reasons.
No question. Yeah.
I went to go watch, I did a piece last year and I followed the Dublin ladies team. I think I sent it to you.
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, and I interviewed a couple of people in the squad, and I got Sinead Gold for about 20 minutes. And she gave me this line, and it was amazing. I'd never actually interviewed her, and I'd love to get her on this. I've been trying for a while. But she gave me an amazing line. She said, I don't know what rugby player said it, but I read it somewhere that you could have, and I was asking her about, AFLW versus ladies football, professionalism. And she said, I was reading a book by a rugby player before, and he said, you have three choices when you come into a team. You can be a plus, a negative, or a neutral. Mm-hmm. And it's up to you every day what you bring. And I was like, this is why she is who she is. And she probably had that in her for so long, but it took maybe reading that to actually realise. And I think the two of them is probably how they've gotten so good, is that attitude.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Orla, what is crucial in that is that somebody sees it in you. So you could be a neutral in a team for a long time where you're just in it. Particularly if you've got 40 players in a squad, it's hard to be seen sometimes. And so people would often say, how do I stand out? How do I find something? Those small chats actually go a long way, because when you go in and you ask for feedback and you say, hey, listen, I want to get better. I need to be on this team. I'm a squad player. I can't get on the starting team. By going and actually asking direct questions, taking the feedback, and then going away and saying, look, hey, I really worked on that. And here's why, and here's what I've done. Those players would have been like that. Like Goldie would have been a very small player when she was younger, didn't have the physical attributes of anybody that people thought was going to make it. But because of how hard she worked, and because she went and asked for feedback and said, well, what else can I do? What else can I do to push myself to here? That's why she became one of the greatest players of all time. And then going to Australia and taking up something, again, learning all the extras, all those things. It's like what we talked about earlier. What are you doing when nobody else is watching? Well, people like her are diligent pros in what they do, and that's why they get better. But I would argue that the relationship they would have had with the coach, because of those small conversations, make the big difference. And that's what I would urge anybody who ever listens to this, who's on the cusp of making or whatever, go and have those questions and those feedback sessions, because if you don't, you will regret it, and you're constantly running around in your head, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? And you're keeping on, if you keep asking yourself the same questions, you're never going to get different answers. But if you go and ask the people who really matter and they tell you there's nothing more you can do, fine. But I guarantee you there's probably something that you haven't considered that maybe they know.
There's a great quote, and I got it from a guy who visited the English FA set up in the UK, and Gareth Southgate had a line, is you've never actually made it because there's no end to learning and developing. And I thought that was just class. And as you said, there's always feedback.
There is. Yeah, there is. And the other one I heard, it was Alex Morgan said it she had been dropped from the American women's team ahead of, I guess it might have been a She Believes Cup. So it wasn't a tournament she would have had to go to, but it was like she was really annoyed that she wasn't going. And one of the coaches said to her, you're just, don't worry, you need to get ready for whenever we need you next. And she was like, oh, I never get ready. I stay ready. And I always thought that was a really good way of putting it, that actually, if you stay ready, then immediately you can turn it on and you can play. Whereas if you have to constantly get ready all the time and lift yourself back up, you're already in that negative space. But I really like that idea of staying ready and never having to get ready.
One of the things with your professional career, I suppose there is a balance to be found with trying to pursue sport at a high level, because realistically you're working when sport is on, which means you will be playing. And for you growing up, you were on Irish teams, Cork teams. Was there ever a point where you were pursuing the professional side of things and you missed the playing, and you ever think, oh, I could have gone and done this or that?
All the time. Like, that was the constant battle for me in my 20s. That was the hardest part about it, particularly when you make the decision of, like, so I wanted to be a sports journalist from when I was a kid, right? That was kind of the dream. I also grew up in an era where being a professional sports person was probably at a distance, really for me. Like, there was a couple of girls ahead of me in a basketball sense, like Susan Moran, who would have gone and played professionally, but it wasn't the norm. Like, the odd person like Niamh Dwyer went to Spain, you would have had a little bit of that, where there was, like, I remember Kate Marr went away as well. There was some of those who were age groups ahead of me, Suzanne Maguire as well, where they would have had opportunities to go abroad, but it wasn't the norm. It certainly wasn't aspirational. And then really there comes a point where, like, even I think the Cork Camogie team was probably the harder one, actually, where we were at a point where certainly when I was playing, Cork were winning and things were going well, but I knew this is all happening at the same time. It's going to be very hard to pursue it. I was moving to Dublin, and the commute thing wasn't probably even as easy, and it's still obviously incredibly difficult for intercounty players to do it, but it feels like the country is a little smaller now, and maybe there's more people doing it. Whereas when I was doing it, they're just, when I wanted to move to Dublin, again, it was like you're walking away from something, like I remember I was still playing at home in Ballinhassig for a little while, but it became increasingly really difficult to do that. So then it was like, okay, I'll play in Dublin, I'll play with Portobello, and do I want to go and play for the Dublin County team? And I remember for a little while entertaining that idea, but it didn't really mean anything to me. And also, I was giving up the chance to work on things at the weekend that I really wanted to be part of. At that time, like RTE, we had the rights to the Premiership that was on at the weekend. The Sunday game was on a Sunday. I was working every Saturday, every Sunday. And genuinely, like, that was more important to me than this. Now, it has been a constant strain, and it has been always in your mind, particularly All-Ireland final days, I always used to find difficult when Cork Camogie team were playing in them, and I would often have been on the radio where you go down afterwards and you meet people and they're your mates and you've played with them for years, and that is very challenging. But equally, they're jealous of what you have and you're jealous of what they have, and somewhere in the middle there's probably a sweet spot that you can celebrate each other's success, but there probably always would have been a sense of a small bit of regret that maybe I didn't get to do all the things that they got to do. But equally, would I give it up? Absolutely not. Like, the choices that I made were the right choices, and I would make them again every single time. It wouldn't even be 9 times out of 10. It would be 10 times out of 10. I know that this is right for me, and I feel like I would not have had thankfully the career that I get to have now if I had stuttered over that and made the wrong decision. Does that make sense?
Totally. Was there ever a point where you said, oh crap, I've made the wrong decision?
Well, there was probably loads of moments where I was like, oh Jesus, what am I doing here? But I would, by the time the thought would have been out of my head, I'm actually quite good at this, where I would have gone, I never get caught up in that kind of stuff. I never would allow the mind to go to the dark place of you've made the wrong decision. I would generally go, listen, I'd love to be in that dressing room now. It would be great. Like, let's say in 14 when Anna Geary was the captain, and I went down onto the pitch afterwards and met them. And like I'd be friends with a lot of them, like that would have won all those All Irelands over the years. But I still got to celebrate it with them. I still got to enjoy it with them. And there would be times where you would have said, I'd love to have just shared some of those days in those years in particular. But equally, like it's all very fleeting, like there is a point at which you're like, this is a lifelong career for me. It's not just for a couple of days in Croke Park or, whatever it is. Like, this is my life. This is what I like dreamed of. This is what I wanted to be forever. And like, I know how lucky I am that I get to do that, because like the amount of people who have dreams who'd love to do this, who never get to do that. So yes, probably a couple of moments of, geez, I'd love to have been there for that, but equally not enough for me to have any regrets.
What advice do you give to someone listening that's in that predicament now, whether it's media or if they want to be a physio or a sports scientist? Because it's the same with physio, sports scientists. If you're going to be involved in the backroom team, you can't play because you're there working. So what advice do you give to someone listening that's maybe in their 20s and not really sure where they want to go?
Yeah, and that's the hard part. And I have had people come to me with this over the years where they've said, look, I'm sitting in this position. I'm the nutritionist, but I also want to play, or I'm the physio and I want to play, or whatever it is. And the thing is, you won't know until you're offered that opportunity. Like for me, they were both sitting there in front of me and it was like, what's more important? And actually, it's very simple when you think about it that way. You have to ask yourself, which one of these two things means more to me? And this means more to me. It's as simple as that. Thankfully, I've probably managed to find some sort of a hybrid. Now, I'm too old now to play very competitive sport, but what I have in my life is an ability to be competitive, to still enjoy sport, to still have an involvement in it at a high level, but also appreciated in my professional capacity that it doesn't take me out of the loop of doing the thing that I love the most. Because if I had to give up my job to do any of that, I wouldn't. You know what I mean? So I think for anybody who is sitting in that situation, and maybe you're thinking, God, what if this doesn't come around again? Maybe it doesn't. But if you feel it's worth it, having a go, then do it. That's one thing I would say. If you want to give it a year, give it 2 years, whatever it is you want to do. But if there is something else, if the physio dream or the whatever is there and there's an opportunity that you feel you won't get again, I wouldn't give that up lightly either.
Yeah, it's a balance to be found with it. One of the things I do want to ask, I actually didn't realise till recently, and why it kind of struck a chord with me was because the whole reason why I started this was because I had a really bad leg injury and I had really bad surgery, or not a really big surgery, sorry, and I was like, I need to find a new relationship with sport because I really struggled not being able to play, and I didn't think I'd actually go back playing at all, and now I play, but not at a very competitive level, which is another struggle in itself. But I didn't realise you actually broke your neck when you were about 18, and talk us through that, because that really shaped where you are now.
Yeah, and to be honest, that was a big part of it. Like that kind of understanding that sport isn't forever. Like that's what comes, So that's when probably it was also, because I was doing my Leaving Cert that year. I was in a neck brace for the whole year. Couldn't carry my backpack. I had to get one of those wheelie bags, which is about the most uncool thing you can think of when you're 18 years of age. But actually, what it did though was, so around that time, like identity for teenagers and all that is a big part of it. But like I was always Jacqui, the sports person. It was always like, oh, there she is. There's Jacqui, the basketball player. I'd be off playing for the Irish team somewhere or whatever. Oh, there's Jacqui, the camogie player. Sure, she's off playing for Cork doing whatever. That's who I was. Like that is who I was to everybody. Whereas like, I remember we had these awards. This is going to sound so trivial now when you hear it, but like when I was in sixth year, there was awards. So there was like an award for every subject. Like there'd be an award for sport, an award for whatever. And like I got an A1 in English in my Leaving Cert, and like I would have been incredibly proud of that. That like that was something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an English teacher if the media didn't work out. I wanted to use that degree. Like I loved writing and I loved all of that. And I remember I didn't get the English award, and I was really pissed off, because I was like I want to be known for something else that's not sport, And I was like, look, this is who I am as well. Like I can not just be like one dimensional or whatever. But I remember being very tied up in my identity of who people saw me as, I think like John Wooden has that famous quote about, like, what people see you as, like your character is who you truly are, but what other people see you as is what your reputation is. And my reputation was always tied up in sport. So when I got injured and I couldn't play for a year, it was like, okay, how do I be something else? How do I show people that there's a bit more to that? And how do I find another identity if this isn't there? And actually, that's when the broadcasting part of it really became so strong in my head that I was fully sure that that's what I really wanted to do. Because I was like, if I never play again, this is what I can do. And this is what I can be known for. And I can use the English, I can use the communications, I can be a bit more than that. And I guess half of it was just stepping myself away from who people thought I was and what I thought I could be.
And it takes sometimes for the thing that sometimes means the most to be taken away, to realise there's actually more to life than just playing sport. And there's so many other identities you can have. Because I found that I was Orla, the athlete, and it was like, sitting on the couch, I couldn't move, couldn't do anything, couldn't leave my house, and I was like, what am I going to be now? And it's then through this I found so many other ways and so many other relationships. And sometimes it's like when you have a kid and they're really good, and it's like, well, you can be so, like, I'd love you to excel in your sport, but I'd love you to be more than an athlete. I'd love to see you do other things. Like, what's your identity now? Are you still the athlete? How do you balance it with other identities?
See, I don't know what people see me as now.
Well, I see you as battling on the court and beating the unbeaten Meteors last season.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like, there's probably again a balance in it where, like, I enjoy playing still. There's definitely a large part of me that feels younger than I am, and I probably allow myself to do that and sometimes trick myself into that as well, which is good. And I do think it's kind of healthy to have that still, because it probably makes me appreciate the job even more. That, like, listen, I'm sure there's going to be times over the rest of my life where I won't be able to do this, but, like, I look at my coach Karen Hennessy, and she still plays for the Irish over 50s team, and I love that idea that you can have sport well later into your life. And I'd love to think that that'll be me. I don't know if it's possible or not, but, I'd certainly like to think that I would have competitive sport in my life for as long as the body is able. That's for sure. I guess the rest of the identity is probably caught up now in the job. I guess that's what people see you as. Like, yes, lots of people see me coaching and they see me with my kids and whatever, but I think the thing that you're predominantly known for is the thing you do most, and that's standing on a sideline presenting the TV coverage or being on the radio or whatever it is. And I like that. I'm probably much more comfortable with it now than I was when I was younger. I think I guess, like, for teenage girls in particular, it's tricky. And when you're in your 20s, you're trying to find yourself and see what you want to be and who you are and all that. So I think your identity piece in that is a lot harder and it's more complicated. Whereas now I'm quite comfortable with who I am. Like, I have enough of the things that I like in my life. I've got a good job. I've got a fabulous family. I've got things that are important to me that work well for me. But you have to get to a stage in your life where you can actually appreciate that. And I'm probably lucky that maybe it's midlife. I don't know what it is, but there's something in me that feels like I can appreciate it now.
Yeah, because you even mentioned, I wrote it down, you said, oh, when people stop wanting to see Jacqui Hurley on the TV, but also, like, it reminded me of and our conversation now reminded me of a line that Paul McGinley gave in the High Performance podcast. And he was saying how he went and did a business degree and worked for a year and then went to the Q school, and his whole identity and his career now is golf. But he said, that allowed me to be the greatest golfer I could be. And I get the sense that all the balance and all the other stuff allows you to be so good at what you do in a professional standpoint.
Yeah, well, I hope that that's what the case is, because I allow all of those things to filter into how I do my job. Like, so Bill O'Hurley would have been somebody I would have watched for years. Love him, like, just absolutely adored Bill, both as a person, but on screen as well. But one of his greatest attributes was letting everybody else be themselves. And the way that he did that was just ask simple questions and then shut up. And the thing is, sometimes we can overcomplicate it, and television is really convoluted. And when people watch it, I'm sure there's loads of people scream at the telly and they're like, why aren't they doing this? Or why aren't you giving more time to this match? Or why are you doing this? Or your man's an idiot. Like, there's loads of that. But also at the very, like, base level of it, all you're trying to do is have a chat with people. It shouldn't be complicated. You should be able to go, hey, come here. What do you think of that? Did you like it? Did you not? Do you think this fella is going to make it? Do you not? And it's actually just facilitating people to talk. And the way you can do that is by exposing yourself to so much of it. I see it literally from the grassroots level to the international level. And there's somewhere in between in all of those pods where you find yourself, whether you're coaching, whether you're a parent, whatever it is, all of those experiences can help the professional one. I just try to lean into them so that when the people at home are watching TV, they feel like they could be having a conversation in the pub, or they feel like maybe they're learning something from an expert, but in a very casual way. And one of the things, Jerry Flannery, when he started working with us on the rugby, and sadly, we actually really miss him now because he's obviously got a great job with South Africa, but he means the commute is a bit tricky. He can't do it with us anymore. But one of the things that he was brilliant at was actually taking a piece of analysis, breaking it down, and showing it to the point that somebody like my mom could actually understand it, who never played rugby, but is a fan and a casual fan, but can actually really understand that. And to be honest, part of the thing is his learnings from being a parent and being around the grounds and just listening to people allowed him to do that. And I think that's a key part in the job, is actually using those simple learnings for the professional part too.
And that's the biggest thing. Like, you hear the argument about the Sunday game, you can talk about some basketball coverage sometimes when it gets too complicated. And it's like, and I'm from a coaching and playing perspective, I'd love for things to go more in depth and even more analysis and stuff. But it's like, it's actually not made for you, the coach, or it's actually, like, we're going by the majority here, and the majority are people that don't coach the game or haven't played at elite level. And I'm sorry, but like, that's just that's the reality, because you're not the majority. And look, if there was scope for a second show to go in depth and think, brilliant, I'd love to see it, but the Sunday game is not that.
Yeah, I agree. And look, to be honest, that is the biggest balance for any production to strike, because you are speaking to the 90%. You're not speaking to the 10%. The 10% are watching anyway because they're going to learn something. They're going to have that. But actually, the 90% are the ones who just want to watch the game. They want to hear a bit of analysis. They want to see how the tries are scored. Or they want to see, if it's a Sunday game, they want to see, oh, how did your man from down the road get on? You know, it doesn't need to be fraught with all of those examples, you know? So I think that's a really key part with it, where you're just trying to speak to the right people.
One of the things I want to ask you about, and you've spoken about finding the balance between facilitating the conversation and allowing the pundits to speak, and I think you do that really well. But one of the other things, and I was even chatting to my mum about it, and funny you mentioned your mum, and my mum wouldn't really have a big interest in sport, but you know, I'd say your name a lot, and I'd say a lot of the other presenters as well. And she was watching the Sunday game for, I don't know, some reason, and she said, God, Jacqui really comes across so warm, and you really do. Like, you're the same as chatting to me, you're the same as when we went for coffee, you're the same on TV, and you're just, your personality, you don't hold back. Like, because you're such a warm person, it comes across on the screen. Like, was that always the case?
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you. Do you know what? I've actually always been of the view that you should be you. And if you're not you on TV, then why are you acting in another way? And that might sound too simple, but actually it's like when somebody asks you a direct question, you're either going to answer it or you're not. And I actually think, particularly when it comes to television, like, it should feel like you're in the living room. Like, part of the joy of the job to me is just like, I always say when we're talking about it, I'm like, oh, sure, I was having the chats today. And they're like, you weren't having the chats. You were actually on TV presenting a live program. But like, to me, it's actually just watching a match and having the chats. And then the Sunday game is a little bit different because there's obviously so many elements and you're trying to constantly fight with time. You've got 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, and it's very convoluted and extremely difficult. So if you ever see me getting thick and flustered on the Sunday game, it's because there's a million people screaming, we don't have any time to do this. And that's the hardest part. But actually, generally with the warmth thing, I would feel that, like I said, when you're trying to speak to the 90% of people, the 90% of people just want to be entertained. They just want to hear what happened in the match. You know, what's your man like? You know, are they going to win? And they want it to feel like it should be engaging, like it could be happening in your pub and you could be just watching people in a live setting. And I think that's the balance that maybe, particularly in television, it feels to me like that has wandered a little bit from where it was. Like, I grew up in an era where Des Lynam, very warm, very engaging, Jimmy McGee, Michael Lester, Bill O'Hurley, Des Cahill, all characters full of joy and crack and a bit of devilment. And that is kind of less obvious now because of the time constraints that are there, but also because maybe people have just moved in a different direction over the years. Maybe like we're more data driven, it's more stats based and less kind of having the crack. And I still think, this is only my personal opinion, but I still think there's enough room for the characters to be able to allow a bit of crack. Like if you can have a joke, like we had on the weekend, I was in Rome doing the rugby, right? And we were after being on air. So we did the Ireland game. We came off air. We went and had some food, sat in the truck, watched the England-Wales game, and then came back on air to do France-Scotland. But it's an incredibly long day, and I'm not going to moan about the job because it's unbelievable. But for people at home, just to recognize, you're in a stadium from like 11 in the morning. We didn't get off air till 11:30 at night. By the time we were in our post-match around the France game, Jamie Heaslip was so tired. He says to Bernard Jackman, live on air, Bernard, how many teams are in the top 14? And it's like he caught himself midway through the sentence and he goes, oh yeah, 14, sorry. But he knew he was live on air. So he just sort of leaned into it, right? But we got such a fit of giggles. Like we had to go to an ad break. I couldn't stop laughing. And in fairness, he was trying to make a very serious point after that. But like I was gone. Like I was just looking at him, but I was laughing. So I was like, right, we're going to go to the break or whatever. But when we went to the break, the whole truck, everyone was just roaring laughing. But it was actually such a light moment that it really lifted the mood. Like there was a lot of people in that truck who'd been working for, 12-hour days. They were all wrecked, but it gave them such a laugh. And I was like, this is good. We should be able to have the crack and laugh. And if somebody makes a mistake, to rip the piss out of them, most importantly, me, but it's actually a lovely environment to be in where we all feel that you are safe, you are protected, but we can still have the crack. It's not Primetime Investigates either. Like it's supposed to be sport, it's supposed to be fun, and I'd like to think that we try to do that as much as we can as well.
Yeah, because I remember I was at the Sport Awards there in December and you were up at the kind of platform with the three, yourself, Darren, Joanne, and the Cork Camogie team were sitting on a table and it was like 10 seconds there and you were there having the crack and slagging someone and just, having the crack. But when you make a mistake, like on air, because natural, we're humans, like how have you evolved to now? Was it like, oh my god, I made a mistake? I know for your first time on radio you might have said something or by accident, but how do you balance making the mistake and having the crack?
Yeah, we see now I'm probably a lot more comfortable because if I made a mistake now, it's probably unless it's like absolutely catastrophic, I'm probably not losing my job. It'd want to be very bad now for that to happen. But in the early years, like when I started presenting Sunday Sport, I went from doing 4-minute radio bulletins to presenting a 4-hour live radio program, totally unscripted, no sheet of like a plan. Like you basically, like for anybody who ever listens to Sunday Sport, what happens is we walk into studio, I have a list of all the games and all the reporters and the kickoff times and all that, but that's it. Like there is no basis for this is a rough plan. It's just let's rock and roll. We're going to go where the goals are, and that's what happens. But like in those chaotic circumstances, stuff happens. Like on my first few weeks, I said shit on the radio, like, and at that point I thought I was going to lose my job because I got called into Anna Leddy's office, who was the head of Radio 1 at the time. And it was a pre-recorded intro. It wasn't live on air. Like it shouldn't have went out on air, but it did. Anyway, very valuable lesson. Never say shit in front of a microphone, unless it's like this when you're repeating it afterwards. But at the time, I was so worried. I was like, oh my God, I was the first ever woman to present the show. I was the youngest ever presenter. I was worried. I was after making a hames of it for everybody else. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm going to get fired. But actually, like, the reality is you apologize. You say, I'm really sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Like, it's terrible. I hope I didn't offend anybody. And we move on. Now, if that was to happen, it will be such water. Like Mac Hansen said the F word on TV last year. And it was like, oh, sorry about that. And then we move on. So like those kind of things are going to happen. To me, it's more like, how do you respond from a mistake where you've actually factually got something wrong and you need to hold your hands up, which does happen because sometimes, you might just make an error, or like you've read something wrong, or the graphic was wrong and you just read it off the graphic or whatever. Like some things like that can happen because we're all humans and we all make mistakes. I think part of the warmth piece is actually being able to say, hey, sorry about that. Before the break, we said this. And actually, sorry, it was totally, that's not correct, whatever. So you probably need to be able to own up to it now And I think I'm probably only comfortable with that in the later part of my career. Whereas I think at the very beginning, if you'd have said to me, hey, you got that wrong, you're going to need to apologize, you'd nearly be afraid to apologize because you were worried that people would think you didn't know, that you were wrong and that you actually didn't know what the right answer, as opposed to it being a slip of the tongue or something you misread or whatever, that you'd be afraid that you'd be seen as vulnerable. Whereas I think now, and maybe a lot of it is because the landscape has changed so much, there's many more women who are on air, the whole kind of platform around the sports space has completely changed. So I would probably feel more safe and secure now than maybe at the start, when my mistake would have been everybody's mistake, because it could have been misconstrued as a gender issue, where a high profile female makes an error on air and she's the first ever presenter. Jesus, there'll never be another female presenter of that show because your one is terrible. So there probably would have been an onus to try to make sure that you were perfect at that time because you didn't want to ruin it for everyone else. Whereas now it would be a Jacqui Hurley makes a mistake. Oh yeah, by the way, so do all the other RTE presenters because they're all terrible, so there'd be a sense of that now. It wouldn't be necessarily gender specific or certainly sports presenter specific, because Lord knows there's enough of them making mistakes all over the place, and me included,
Yeah, it's like coming back from break. Oh, Jamie, there's still 14 teams.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a great scene in Hidden Figures, and when one of the actresses goes to the court and to the judge, and she says how important it is to be the first. And you have had so many titles of the first woman to do lots of things. How important has that been to you?
Probably more important as the years have gone on, being honest. When I first got Sunday Sport, I actually didn't know I was the first woman until I was doing media interviews and a journalist said it to me. And I was like, oh, right, God, kind of wish I'd have known that. I might have been better prepared and had a better answer than, oh my God, it's a great privilege. But it's actually later in life when you realize, particularly I see it now, where I would have a lot of female budding journalists who are in college or who are coming through the ranks, and a lot of them would reach out to me and ask me for advice, or would I do an interview with them or do something for their FYP or their thesis or whatever it is. And I'm always really encouraged to see, and by the way, sorry, a lot of men reach out to me too, but it's actually, I guess it's the impact of what young women see, because it means that they recognize that there's people like me and Marie and Joanne and Yvonne, and Valerie Wheeler, who are on screen regularly, that they feel they can reach out to us. And that's a great thing, because I didn't have that when I was coming through. And knowing that you're the first, I guess the most important part of it is that you won't be the last. Like when I stepped away from Sunday Sport, Marie Crowe went in, and I was like delighted for her, because it's a great opportunity for her to do a show that she had grown up listening to as well. And knowing that the opportunity didn't just stop with me, that there was a landscape change, that everybody was getting more, has been really, really amazing to watch, I have to say. That, the other stuff, the more firsts you do, the more you kind of realize, you're like, oh my God, like this is like, it is in a way, you kind of don't want it to be constantly, oh, the first, because it means that we're still not changing at the rate that you want it to change. But equally, that in your place in history, maybe 20, 30 years down the line, when I'm long gone out of the building, it's actually, what is your impact on what the next generation see? Because I watched Claire Balding when I was younger. I watched Hazel Irvine. I watched Sue Barker. Gabby Logan is probably maybe 10, 15 years older than me. So she would have been somebody else I would have seen. And I saw the legacy and impact that they have now. And it would be lovely to think that there's young girls coming through who say, I saw a pathway because people like Jacqui did it. And whether they liked the way I did it or not, the fact that you're the first has probably opened doors for them. And that's a nice thing.
I remember when I started this whole project, I never know what to call it. You were like my 30th follower. And I was like, oh my God, Jacqui Hurley just followed me. But like, there was social responsibility, and I spoke to Daniel Whiffen about this. You're very conscious of it, and you constantly give back. And I give back. And I remember I met you for coffee in 2022 in the canteen in RTE, and I just messaged you, and you said, "Sure, send me an email," and you gave me like 2 hours plus of your time, And that's in an industry that doesn't always happen. So you're very conscious of that social responsibility as who you are, being on screen.
Yeah, do you know what though? Like, I always feel I never had that, and I think it's important that So, you know, like back in the day when I got into RTE, a lot of people would have said, oh, do you know somebody in there? You know, like, do you have family or whatever? Because it would have been very difficult. But no, I didn't know anybody. I just applied for a job and got in there or whatever. I actually think it's really important that people coming through realize that there are opportunities, because sometimes you're told no all the time. Like when I was starting out, there was so many no's before there were yeses. And I also had a lot of people who told me, it'll never happen. You'll never get a job in the media. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there who still think that that is the case. But there are actually jobs in media, and there is a very rewarding career if you want to do it. And I would encourage people to do it because I think it's the best career you'll ever have. I really do. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't feel that way. But I also think, like, what is an hour of your time to somebody else? Now, listen, sometimes it's not always easy to give it because you've got a million other plates spinning. But I do think when somebody is coming through and there's something that they want to ask you, or there's a benefit that you can give them, then you should do that, because I wished I had that. And like, that's a lot of the reason why, you know, I help out with the RTE internship program. I wrote the Girls Play 2 books because I always felt like if you don't do it, who else will? So rather than waiting for somebody else to do it, why don't you just do it? And actually, there's a lot of joy in the reverse bit of it. So like you and I would have spent time together when you were doing the internship as well. And seeing people like you grow and knowing that you're now ready to do the job is actually unbelievably rewarding. So like, it's nothing to do with what I would have done for you, but it's more like how I actually can interact and watch you grow. It's no more than what we talked about with the coaching piece. It's actually just watching people from afar and maybe giving them small little tips and guidance along the way. But actually, that's unbelievably rewarding as well. So it's actually just trying to make sure that you allow yourself to be a person that people can feel that they can come and ask for feedback from, but also know that it's a really important ladder effect, that you help other people to go up, because like, what's the point otherwise? I just don't see any point in protecting the keys to the kingdom and not letting anybody else in there, because there's enough jobs for everybody. There's enough of a landscape for us to help each other. And I think the more talented people there are at the table, the better it's going to be.
Brilliant. And I really appreciate all the time you gave me and continue to give me.
Oh God, no worries.
I do want to ask you, in terms of being in the public eye, and I remember you had a great story about Kelly Harrington being in Tokyo, and you were the first person she saw outside the staff, and she gave you a big hug and she felt like she knew you. How do you find that, being in the public light? Is that difficult? And I'm conscious there's, you know, people think, oh, what do you think? Who do you think she is? You know that famous TikTok thing, you can't nip to the shop in your pajamas anymore to pick up a pint of milk sort of thing. But what's it actually like? Because even I found when I met Dara Maloney, I was like, I feel like I know you because I just listened to you from when I grew up to now. But like, how do you find that when, you know, or are you conscious of it?
Yeah, I guess probably the Sunday game is a funny one, because Des Cahill, who I would actually be quite very close to Des, which you know, but lots of people are always fascinated by what are the media relationships with. But when I got asked to do the Sunday game, there was a lot of things going on at the time. It was really challenging because I was doing multiple of other jobs and I didn't know if I'd be able to do it all. And I rang Des and I was like, oh, look, what do you think here? Or, you know, and he was the first person to say, just so you know, Sunday game, great job, massive opportunity. It's brilliant, but it's going to change your life. He was like, 1 million people will watch the rugby on the weekend, but there's a very good chance they won't all walk up to you in the shop and start running you the riot act about whatever. He said, but there could be 250,000 people watch the Sunday game nighttime program, and you can be absolutely sure that 10 or 15 of them are going to come over and say, why didn't you show more of this? Why didn't you do this? What about this? You know, whatever. Because he's right. It's in every fabric in society, and it's different. Like, there's something very different about being the Sunday game presenter, because everybody has an opinion about the GAA, the new rules. Like, I've lost count of the amount of people who've come over chatting to me saying, what do you think about the 2-point arc? And Jesus, the goalies are being fiercely unfairly punished, aren't they? You know, people just have an opinion on it. Personally, I love it. I've always enjoyed having the chats with people, from children to older age groups. Having the crack and having those chats are actually really beneficial to me, and I've always really enjoyed that. So that doesn't bother me. But there's definitely more of it probably in the last couple of years since I took over the Sunday game than there would have been before. I guess it's just part of the profile. Like, I've been out with Marty, and seen him in action where like I've been inside in Coppers with Marty where there was more people queuing to talk to him than there was at the bar. And like I'd be laughing saying, Jesus, how do you do this? Like, how do you do it every night? And he doesn't even drink. So I was like, you have the patience of Job to be doing this. But he's at a different level than most other people that I know. And he has the patience levels that I've never seen before. So that is probably where I've taken learnings from over the years, from seeing the likes of him and Des in action and seeing that generally most people just want to come over for a quick chat, say hello, and off they go. And that's it. So it doesn't really bother me, the public eye thing. It's actually, in my experience over the years, it's been the impact that it has had on my friends, where let's say I might be out with my friends from home and they don't get to see me all that often because I live in Dublin and I've a mental busy life. So when I'm with them and then somebody wants to come over and talk to me, that drives them crazy because they're like, hey, she's on airtime now. You can have her whenever you want. Write her a letter. I don't care what you want to do. She's having the crack with us and she's with us. So it's probably more the wider impact on everybody else as opposed to me.
In terms of the skills that are needed to be a presenter and be one of the best presenters, and because you are, in my opinion, and in plenty of other people's opinion, what's the most important skill to be at the top of your game?
Like, it probably people take it for granted, but the listening part is actually the most important part of it, because lots of people think, oh, you know, I know all the facts and I can deliver this and I can do this. But actually, you really miss out on so much if you don't just listen. Because particularly, let's say, I would have always, if I'm ever doing sideline interviews or anything like this, and when David Gillick was starting out, I remember sitting down with him and saying, you know, one of the first things that you should do is let the athlete speak. And you should ask them, well, what did you think of that? Or, you know, how are you feeling? Or, you know, where's the head at after that? Or whatever it is, rather than tell them what the narrative is. Like, I would never shove a microphone in somebody's face and say, you must be really happy with that win, or you must be really sad with that performance, or whatever it is. Because actually, that person has put their life and soul into this performance, and it's not up to you to dictate what their performance is. It's up to them to say, I'm really happy with it, or I'm not happy with it. And that's kind of the key part in, I don't know, just understanding the job and how you do it, but just being able to frame the narrative around when you ask them a question, when they tell you, I'm really happy with that. That's the best I've run. I've been feeling sick all week. I wasn't ready. I didn't know what kind of a performance I was going to do. And then you listen and you go, oh, you weren't feeling well. Tell us a bit more about that, whatever it is. But the absolute gold that you can miss out on by not listening, it's something I say to young journalists all the time. Yes, you can focus on all the stats. You can try to have everything you want, but asking simple questions and listening are actually the two most important things that you can do in this industry.
I remember you were saying that to myself and a couple of people last year. It was about when you're, let's say, after an All-Ireland final and you have whoever and you're like, oh, this must be the best day of your life.
Yeah.
And you've robbed, I remember you saying it, you robbed them of their opportunity to say that.
Totally. Yeah. And like, you have to be aware that in a lot of these circumstances, these people are not being media trained within an inch of their lives. Like, some of the Olympic athletes might get exposure to media training ahead of a major event, and that's it. Every other day of the week, they're training, you know, with nobody watching, you know, in a very quiet environment, and they're just having the chats with their friends. So then you shove a microphone in their face and you say, this is the best day of your life. But they're not going to say, well, actually, no, the day that I got married was actually better than this, but this is pretty good too. Or when you frame a question where there's so much information in it that all they have to say is yes, then you're not doing your job either. And that's why I say simple questions are suddenly really, really important, where you just go, either it's like asking somebody to express the emotion, like that's where the joy is, you know, where it's their moment and they should be the ones. And also the other thing is having a bit of grace and realizing when it's not their moment. You know, like, I've been at a lot of events where it hasn't gone the way of people. Particularly Olympics is actually one that always stays with me, where there's a lot of Olympians who've been building up to something for 4 years, and then on the day, for whatever reason, it doesn't go their way. And I remember in one circumstance in particular where I was at an Olympics and there was an Irish athlete who was tipped for a medal and really, you know, it was deserving of a medal based on performances over the recent times in the lead up to the Olympics. And a lot of people would have felt that this person was going there with that. But when they had a catastrophic day and came through the mix zone, and I saw them and I had become close to this athlete and they started crying, and I just turned off the camera. I said, look, the interview can wait. You just go get yourself together and come back. Now, There's probably a lot of people who'd say, oh, that could have been TV gold. It'd be brilliant. Let's get the tears. It'd be great. But number one, this person is not on TV all the time. And it is up to you to be responsible for how they are conveyed to their friends and family who haven't seen them yet. And you're the first person that they see, and you're shoving a microphone in their face and asking them, why didn't they do better or whatever? Whereas you can actually show a bit of grace and say, look, I'm going to give you a minute. You come back to me when you're ready. And then they do. And then they're grateful for it. And also, there's a long relationship there that doesn't need to be burned in one day with a lot of these athletes, where like I've been in this business for 2 decades, and a lot of these people, you know them, you talk about Kelly Harrington there. Like I know Kelly Harrington, like I've followed her career for years, but also I've gotten to know her over the years, and you really wanted to work out for her. So when she comes out of the ring, yes, first and foremost, you're there as a journalist and you're there to do your job. But also in those moments where her family aren't there and her partner is there, you're there also to be like, let her feel the joy and emotion of sharing it with somebody that she knows. And that's important too. So having the grace in those moments is actually a big part of the job that people probably don't teach you about.
I love that story when you shut off the camera. I've heard you speak about it a number of times. When you mentioned listening skills being the most important, where does resilience and patience rank then?
Yeah, they're pretty big too now, to be fair. Patience is a big part of it because in this industry, it is a very slow burner, and even like I've said this to you before, there is a point at which you're banging your head off the wall saying, when is it going to happen for me? And like somebody I remember famously said to me years ago in RTE, your big break doesn't come in RTE until you're in your 40s, right? Now, when I started in RTE, I was 21. So you can imagine, I was thinking, oh, Jesus, this is a long time to wait. And like when the Sunday game came up in 2017, the first time, I was thinking, sure, like I'm ready now. Like, why aren't I getting it now? But actually, somebody else has to decide that you're ready, because that's the way that this industry works. Somebody says you're ready now. And even though you think you've done all the work and you're ready to take the next step, it's still down to somebody else. And that's why you have to be patient, because the right boss needs to be there, the right opportunity needs to be there, and everything needs to fall into place for you to get that gig. And it's really, really hard, because particularly in the television industry, at any time, there's really only a couple of chairs. So right now, I occupy the rugby chair. Joanne Cantwell presents the live GAA. Polo Flynn is kind of doing a lot more of the athletics and those kind of like Olympic sports like rowing, gymnastics or whatever. And the soccer, Joanne Cantwell is doing most of it. So that's it. There isn't really another opportunity where there's another chair just going to randomly appear for somebody to step into. So you really need to be patient and wait your turn. And it might seem like it's never coming. And that's a really, really hard part. The other thing is the resilience of when it doesn't happen. Like to me, like I said, there was loads of opportunities where they just didn't come my way for whatever reason. There was a lot of no's, and you have to be able to deal with that. And again, I probably have struggled with that at different points in my career, where with the Sunday game in particular, when it didn't happen and I felt like it should happen, I think that's the hardest part to deal with, where you feel like you're ready for a gig and somebody just doesn't give it to you because they think somebody else is better fitted for it. That's where the resilience piece comes in of, are you willing to stick this out, or is there something else for you? And to me, at that time, I felt like there was something else for me. I just thought, well, like if all those chairs are only coming up every so often and they're all occupied now by people who are in the prime of their careers, then I'm going to be waiting for about another 10 or 15 years. And I'm just not willing to wait that long. So there comes a point at which you have to keep putting yourself in those positions where you're going to be considered. But it's hard. Like it's really hard to be resilient in those where you feel like you can't see the breakthrough. And for me, it took for somebody else to say, I have something in mind for you. There is a plan. And I probably now looking back can see what the plan was, but I needed somebody to remind me because I was ready to go out the door.
There was also another story which I didn't know, but you were a sub-editor behind the scenes and you spoke about that a lot. But Ray Houghton was someone that you were talking to, and he, not to say he gave you your big break, but he had the wherewithal to not only chat to you and recognise, geez, he's really good, but he went to whoever he went to and said, get her on TV. Like, you know, when you look at that, you know, you're in the background and there are limited spots to go on air, but how much of a moment was that for someone to back you early on when you were just behind the scenes doing your analysis?
Yeah, it's huge because you don't see that, like I just remember, so I obviously was a sub-editor for a couple of years actually, and I loved that job. So one of them would have been cutting the analysis for the Sunday game, which obviously we still do now. Then we had the rights to the Premiership at that time. So Darren Maloney used to present it. It was on a Saturday night. Liam Brady, Ronnie Whelan, Ray Houghton, they were all on it. It was brilliant. It was like great fun being in your early 20s, working in RTE, because we had the rights to everything then. We were showing live Heineken Cup on the weekend. Now I know like it sounds like I'm describing now, but there was a lot of years in between when we didn't have those live rights. But there was a group of us in our 20s that came through at that time that were working as sub-editors. But like I used to be sitting in the background cutting Ray's analysis with him. And I remember this, like several conversations we would have had where we would have been, not arguing is too strong a word, but debating about the values of having a holding midfielder or why they wouldn't try to play this structure or whatever it was at the time. But I remember we were having one particular conversation and Ray was like, that's a really good point. We should be having this conversation on air, And I thought, God, that had probably not, like it might have been something that I wanted to do, but we were a million miles away from that. Like I was working in the background. There was no chance of me being on air. I wasn't even on air doing anything, I think, at that point. And he went to Glenn Callan, who was the boss in RTE Sport, and he said, she's really got something, you should really consider it. And it was after that I got opportunities in radio. So like Ray Houghton is not responsible for me being on RTE Sport, but he is indirectly responsible for those opportunities that we talk about. I remember one of the first things that Royal Nugent said to me was he was the deputy head of sport at that time when Glenn was the boss. And I was doing a slot on TTV at the time. So just before Home and Away, there used to be these little slots where they'd bring people on, they'd talk about different things. I got the sports slot one, right? And I was living in Limerick at the time, working in Live 95 in local radio. And I was driving up on a Monday doing that and then driving back down. But one Monday, I asked Royal Nugent, would he meet me for coffee? Because I wanted to work in production. And when I walked into his office, he said, your timing is impeccable. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, well, look, the landscape is changing and we are going to be looking for more women. There's going to be a group come through. So I'm certainly interested in talking to you. And he said, for you to make any breakthrough, it is 70% timing, 30% ability. And he was like, over time, those two will flip. But right now, 70% timing, and your timing is unbelievable. So I do believe that some of it is down to chance and some of it is down to what do people say when you're not there. And Ray Houghton was one of those really positive advocates for me that, like, we would still laugh about it now. Like, even if I ever get to work with him or I meet him or, he'd often be doing the Euros or the World Cups and I might be involved in them. And we'd often laugh and say, geez, it's been a long few years since we sat out the back in those. But he knows that might have been a very small thing to him. It might have been nothing for Ray to just say, here, come here, your one's very good. But actually, it made a huge difference to me because he backed me when I wasn't there.
When you mentioned you have something, what was the something? Do you know?
To be honest, I don't know. I've never been able to put my hands on it. Like people say, oh, how do you get to be successful? What is it? I actually genuinely don't know. I don't know why it's me and not somebody else. And I'm not being smart. I really don't. There was a million other people who could do what I do or who could have had the career that I have. And I get that. I might have just come along at the right time. It's possible. I'd like to think that some of it is down to what we talked about earlier, where I think anybody who meets me would probably say, I'd like to think they would say that I am the same person on the screen as I am off it. You very rarely get a different person. I probably swear less on the television, thankfully, than I do in real life. But I am pretty much, I am who I am. I'm pretty open, honest. If you ask me a question, I will answer it. And I'd like to think that there's something in that maybe there was a warmth in my personality that people thought I could have a chat with her. I'd like to be friends with her. I think I like that girl. And I think there's an element of that where I think Irish people like to feel that we like somebody. And maybe we all have this inane thing of we like to be liked as well. I definitely have that. And I think maybe there was a girl next door quality that people felt like, yeah, I could be mates with her. I could go for a pint with her. And I think maybe there's a certain charm in that worked for me.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. I remember going for coffee and I was like, Jesus, Jack is the exact same. But when I actually was doing my research for this, I was on YouTube just looking up different clips and your show reel came up from
Jesus.
From about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
What is the biggest evolution of your career?
Oh God. I mean, probably those years really where it's, it's all, it can go anyway. Like the biggest thing to me is that internship I did in America is the reason I have my job. Like at that point, I had a choice of I was offered an internship in InStyle magazine in New York, which would have been amazing. It would have been a great opportunity, but I always felt like I might have been making tea and I might have been, one very small cog in a huge wheel. Whereas I was offered another opportunity to go to Columbus, Mississippi and work for a local TV station called WCBI. And I knew that there I could do every job available and I could work incredibly hard and come back and be probably overqualified because I knew that I would work hard and I would come back with a skill set that not too many other people my age had. And that's the biggest thing where taking that leap has allowed me to get to here. In the middle of all that, you've got a work ethic, well, that will put you ahead of other people, but also the whole game changed where like people were looking for multitask people. So like I would have worked a lot in radio. I worked in production. I produced a couple of documentaries. So like those people who were willing to do other jobs were like, let's say with the Olympics, I got to go to my first Olympics in London 2012. It's because I was presenting the radio program, but I was also on TV and I could multitask. So I guess the biggest evolution really is adapting to all the multiple skill sets, being able to write, being able to broadcast, being able to, do whatever it was required and say yes to it. That's the biggest thing. And one other key part in it was just how much the landscape changed in terms of we went from having everything to having nothing, where you have to work incredibly hard to make more television happen, to suddenly having everything again and more. Because now we're doing more women's sports, more what would have been deemed minority sports, and all of that comes with it. So there's a big onus on you to constantly evolve through that and make sure that you can adapt when the game changes.
What's the next evolution in the media landscape? You speak about minority sports, we've TikTok, we've podcasts now. Where's the next thing, do you think?
Well, there's no doubt about it. Women's sport is the biggest expanding game there is out there. If you look across, all of the metrics tell us that it is only going one way. I'm a basketball fan, as you are, like March Madness now. When you see the figures for that and the constant evolution that is happening there, that is a microcosm of what is happening around the world. And for sure, women's sport, if you're not on the train by now, then it's coming at you full force. And 2025, particularly this year with a women's Euros and a women's Rugby World Cup, you're going to get a lot of exposure this year where there aren't those same men's tournaments that would garner that kind of attention. So I think that 2025 is going to be big for that. I also think with social media, there has been such a turn in the way it's being filtered now. So you had like everything was on Twitter and it was the only place to be. Now suddenly there's a large step away from that and a lot of people are finding it somewhere that's not a safe space for them to be. TikTok was the place where lots of people gravitated towards, and that seems to be a universe in itself where people are just content creating all the time. I think there's probably somewhere in between that. Linear is still going to have to exist in its current format. I think particularly for live sport, it is going to be here, but it might not just be in the presence that we currently see it. I think you're going to see a lot more split models where the linear version exists along with the social version. And I'd love to see that. I'd love to see chat alongs on phone, live on like Gary Neville, Roy Keane did this thing like a watch party for Sky Sports. And I thought it was brilliant because I was like, look, how do we, one of the things that we constantly talk about, and the Sunday game is a big part of this, it's very hard to have meaningful dialogue with the people who watch the show because you're either getting an extremely negative reaction where people say, I hate this show, I can't watch the show, or you're getting people emailing in and saying, could you do more of this, But you can't have a real dialogue because you're only emailing somebody back and saying, I understand your concerns, or yes, we'll try to do more of that. But actually, if it was something that was ongoing all the way through the program where we could say, come here, Orla's just after texting in here. She said this championship is completely flawed. What do you think? And you're putting those questions directly to the pundits. I actually think there is a connection there that so far we don't really have. And I'd love to explore that, where that split screen model works in tandem with each other.
I'm conscious of time. I don't want to open up a can of worms, but integration.
Jesus, how long have you got?
I'll limit it to one question. what's going to be the biggest challenge? Because we know the opportunities, we know what could happen, but to me, and I think the group, I think they're brilliant. Who they have in the group is fantastic, but the eyes are gazed very high and they're not on the ground and the grassroots. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge with integration?
Like the money, like I just don't see anybody grasping it. Like I've heard people saying aspirationally 2027, but I don't see the fruits of that. I just don't. Like I would love to sit here and be positive about it and say that this is coming and it's going to be great. And it is, but I can't see it coming. It just, like, for what has to happen right now, like if you even look at the camogie and ladies football, even trying to get a fixture list out so that people who are covering the games know where they're on, what time they're on, and can I get a squad list? It is still incredibly difficult. And I actually don't lay the blame of that, all of it, at the doors of the LGFA or the Camogie Association, because they are still fighting on limited terms of they don't have access to facilities until too late, oftentimes, to be able to tell people where those games are going. But also when you're seeing things like what happened there recently, where the players' injury fund is saying that they're not covered if they're not playing effectively an inter-county match or as a designated training, then what are we doing? We are not looking after our players in the same way. Unless we treat them the same, then how can we expect that they're ever going to be the same? And I'm a realist here, right? So I understand the logic where people come around and they say, well, the men's game is way more profitable and there's more people going to it and all that. I understand all that, right? But I also recognize that if you treat people the same and you give them the same opportunities and the same platforms, that's the way that they're going to progress. And that's not happening at the moment. And to me, so I'm involved in Kilmacud Crokes and we would operate on a one club model. And in fairness, there's a female chairperson there who has been very, very strong over the years, which probably helps. But that doesn't mean it's not a battle. There are still things happen in the background where somebody has to step in and say, oh, come here, but are we doing that for the girls? Are we doing the same thing for the boys? And you still need to ask the questions. And I think until you get to a point where there's a recognized mandate that comes in at club level for us before it comes to county level and it's understood everywhere, then I just don't see it happening anytime before 2030. And like that sounds probably like a really negative mindset for people to hear. And I'm sure there's probably people listening to this saying, I can't believe you're saying that. But I'd love to see what do the steps look like and bring us all on the journey and show me by the end of 2026, this is what we need to see. By the end of 2028, this is what we need to see. And here's what our full integration looks like in 2030 when everything is exact same. But to me, it feels quite aspirational from what I've seen. But I'd love to be wrong, Orla. I would so love to be wrong.
100%. And I'd love to be wrong and I'd love to see it go smoothly. But I think for anybody who has their feet on the ground, they do not see this happening. And I'd love to be wrong. But I think, as you mentioned, I think if we can't get the basics right, then why are we trying to, like, we're looking to launch a rocket to the moon right now and we can't even get the supplies to build a rocket. And for me, that just needs to... I'll park integration there because we could continue, but I did want to ask you, Jacqui, I ask most guests this and I'd love to know, what's your definition of success?
Oh, God, it's a hard one to define because it's constantly moving. To me, it's actually just my own personal fulfillment, I guess, is probably the easiest way to put it. Success has probably meant different things to me over the years. A lot of it probably would have been wrapped up in like that thing of what I said, where there's a hierarchy of what your identity is. And a lot of it probably would have been chasing that ultimate goal. And when you get it, then that being defined as the success. Oh, because I got that. But actually, the older I got, the more they moved. And the more now I'm kind of less preoccupied with the things I present or the things I do in my job. It's actually more as what is my fulfillment? Am I getting the absolute most out of myself in a professional capacity, in a personal capacity? Am I the best wife, mom, daughter, sister, whatever it is? Am I good at those things? And to me, success is my barometer of I remember Jim Gavin said to me years ago, he was like, there's 5 balls in the air. And so at any one time, some of them might be up here and they're harder to catch, but they're all around, you know. So it's like, which one would I drop first? And to me, there's some that are absolutely crucial. And like the family one is the first. And we've obviously in my family already had that incredibly dreaded tragedy of the youngest person in the household passing away when my brother died. And that's just an unimaginable grief for a family to have to go through. But what it does give you is enormous perspective. So that's why I can be like, what is my personal fulfillment? Because my mom always used to say, what's the worst that can happen? The worst has already happened. So everything else, you might as well just go for it. So that's why I'm kind of able to judge that success now on, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I doing all the things that I want to do? And if I'm not, then just change the picture.
I do want to ask about kind of what's the coolest part of the job? And I don't even like that, but I am looking at all the signed jerseys on the wall. And apart from all the people you get to meet, what is actually the coolest part about being a sports presenter on our national broadcaster?
It's being there. Honestly, people always say, what is it? And I'm like, being on the sideline. Like I was in Rome at the weekend, and I know the Irish rugby bubble, people might feel there was a bit of air left out of it, but it's still the most incredible place to be, where you have that united feeling of a million people are watching something and you're there in the middle of it. There is not a greater buzz in life than doing that, unless you're playing in the event. But like, I think to me, the level of excitement and like watching, like, you know, your heart rate rising, the fun, the joy that's in it, like it's just not, I mean, I know there's that tagline, nothing beats being there, but that's actually what it's like. It's just that sense of, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this. Like it's really, that's the best bit. The Olympics is really probably the pinnacle of that, because it's the sporting spectacle that I love the most. It's the thing that probably from when I was a kid, it's the one that I wanted to go to. Like I always knew, like even when I was a kid, I was going to All Ireland finals. I was going to watch matches all over the place, but getting to an Olympic Games, which is the greatest sporting spectacle, getting to that every 4 years. I've been to 4 of them. It's probably still the greatest privilege I've ever had, is getting to report on Olympic Games. And it's the thing that if somebody said to me, you have to give up like anything in your job, going to the Olympics is something. Like even for the last one, they were like, would you like to stay here? Would you like to go? I was like, oh, I'm going. Like if there's any chance I can go, please send me, because it's the last thing I would want to give up.
What makes it so special?
It's just that they're all there together. Like if it was just that, it was, let's just say the athletics was all that was there, it would be amazing. But it wouldn't have the same sense of they're all there. You've got basketball in one place, the gymnastics is on over here, the judo is here, and all the athletes are going around watching each other. Like I'm watching Court of Gold at the moment. I don't know if you've seen it, the basketball one. It's class, right? It's really cool. But you're watching it and you've got like Steph Curry there watching Simone Biles. And I'm there going like, these athletes are all here at the same time and they don't all know each other. It's epic. There's no other sporting spectacle that will put all of the world's best athletes in the one place at the one time. And like, you'd see some of the really cool videos of them all bumping into each other in the athletes' village. It's a little bit like that for the journalists as well, because you're meeting journalists from all over the world who maybe you follow on the internet and you bump into them. And it's just like anybody who's anybody in the sport is there. And there's something really, really unique about that.
What I do love that series, and I love when like Anthony Edwards is trying to say he's going to beat the tennis player, and I'm like, lad, you don't know what you're
yeah
100%. What's the biggest misconception about athletes?
It's hard because a lot of them are so individual, but I do think people probably see them as robots. I think that would be the hardest part for a lot of athletes. Social media has broken down some of those barriers, but I would still talk to a lot of them and they feel like trying to show their true selves is very hard, because they're always so guarded in media interviews. Like there's like some of them, there's just no point in showing them, because it's just like, oh yeah, we're really happy. We're going to try to win this game and we're going to respect our opponents and they're brilliant, even though their opponents might be absolute shite and they've no chance of winning the game. You just don't get any truth from athletes anymore because they're worried about saying something that's going to be offensive. And I completely understand that. But what it has done is remove their personalities where they're afraid now to be themselves because they're worried about what their teammates will think about them or what their competitors will think about them. So I think the biggest kind of misconception is that they don't have any personalities, because they definitely do. And when you meet them out and away from the microphone, you actually tend to meet very different people who in another life you could be quite friendly with and you might have a lot of time for and you think they're great people. But when they step in front of your microphone, that's a whole other story. But I understand why they're guarded. I do. I see it a lot more the longer I'm doing it. But I do think for people who are following these, it's very hard to get a true sense of what these athletes are like, because social media is only a very small picture of it.
What does it mean to be a professional? I remember I said it to you before last summer, and I said there's something when you as a presenter, and all the other presenters have it as well, where you just turn it on and you're ready into camera. And you were like, oh yeah, that's part of the job. But I was like, no, it's a skill in itself. But what does it actually mean to be a professional in any facet of life? I'm just using your background as an example.
It's probably hard to define, because for me, it's like I mean, if people are ever the at a match, let's say, and they see me on the sideline and I'm yapping away, and then somebody's going 5, 4, 3, 2, I'm probably chatting away and then going, "Hi, how's it going? Welcome back," whatever. I am probably the least flustered in that environment, because I'm like, "Era, sure, look, if somebody catches me chatting, coming back in, grand, whatever, it's not the end of the world." So being professional probably means something to different people. Like other people might be very have to stay in the moment. They have to kind of keep the head down and then come on when they're on. Whereas like being professional to me means like being to use an Andy Farrell expression, the best version of myself. And the best version of myself is a calm, relaxed, kind of chilled environment. One piece of really useful advice that I had over the years was Marion Finucane was one of my idols, right? And she had this brilliant expression was, it takes a lot of homework to sound that relaxed. And that's kind of the way that I've always been, very relaxed, very like in control in the environment. But it's because I've spent the week reading the newspapers. I've listened to pretty much every podcast there is out there. I've watched back the matches. I know what I'm talking about because I have prepared all week. And being a professional kind of never stops. So one thing that I probably sometimes have to catch myself is I'm rarely off, if that makes sense. So you might only see me on TV at the weekends, or you might hear me pop up on radio or on the news desk or wherever it is. But even when I'm not on, I'm on in some capacity. I read the newspapers every single day. I listen to podcasts every day. I'm always sort of keeping tabs on what's happening. And particularly when I work across multiple sports, like at the moment, I'm obviously just finishing up on the rugby, be moving on to the GAA with the Sunday game starting on the 6th of April. But obviously I'll have rugby in the middle of that with the Champions Cup being on. So you're still straddling two horses at the same time. And sometimes that can be the biggest challenge, where you have to be across two sports that are in the knockout stages of both of them, and that can be hard. But I like the challenge of that. I like being constantly listening and constantly learning. So to me, being professional is actually just doing the absolute most that I can to be prepared, but to do like what Marion Finucane said, where you see me rock up on a Saturday and I'm very relaxed, but it's because I've done all my homework.
When you say you don't switch off, the saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, comes to mind. Is that true?
Yeah, probably. But like then my husband would probably say, Jesus, would you ever take a day off? Like just have a duvet day and just chill out. Don't do anything, So I do try to do that a little bit. It's not always easy, but I do think you have to make yourself switch off from time to time, where you just don't pick up the paper and you don't listen to podcasts, and you just like, I love music as well. So I often, people say, what would you do if you didn't work in the sports industry? I'd probably work in the music industry, but it'd probably be the same thing then. I'd be obsessed with that and I'd never switch off. So maybe it's just a personality trait.
I'm not retiring you just yet, but you're very conscious of when the door at RTE closes someday. And I know you mentioned Bill Hurley before when he left, but when that door does close and people say your name, Jacqui Hurley, what would you like to be remembered for from a presenter professional point of view?
I'd like to think that people thought, first and foremost, that I tried to be fair to everybody, that I sort of, you gave people the room to express themselves. that I allowed people to be themselves. Like that's a key thing, like we talked about being warm and trying to be engaging or whatever. The best thing that I can do is to get the best out of our pundits. And if they don't feel that they performed well, then that's probably on me. So I think, when I talked about Bill, the reason people loved Bill is because he did that. He had this incredible knack of asking a question that would allow the pundit to just relax and just speak. And so I would often say, particularly when we have new pundits coming in, and they would often say, like, what should I do, or what this? And I'll just say, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to ask you a question and you just chat away to me. And that's the way it should feel. So I'd like to think if there was anything that I could be remembered for, it was that I made people feel comfortable, and that by chatting to them, I let them be themselves.
On a broader scheme of things, and could be any facet, it's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. It's a line I've robbed from a sports psychologist in America. Finish the sentence: at the end of the day, it all comes down to.
Oh, God. Probably perspective, I would say. Everything in life, your perspective shapes who you are and how you see it. To me, I have had, you know, one of the most charmed lives in terms of I was very lucky to be born in Cork, where all the greats are from. Or like, there's as Roy Keane says, it's Cork by the grace of God. And I think like that's probably the first stroke of luck. The second is to have an incredible family who just, there was never a no, like my mum and dad moved to Australia in the 80s to give us a better life. My mom's a nurse, my dad's an electrician. They wanted to just try to give us experiences that we had never had before. And they did that for us. And even when they made the decision to come home, it was for us as well. It was so that we could come back and know our family and have our life here. My sister is a pilot. My brother, sadly, before he passed away, was about to become a semi-professional motorbike racer. I'm a sports broadcaster. They are not three normal professions in any walk of life, but there was never a sense in my family of, oh, you can't do that. It was always, oh, I think you'd be brilliant at that. Let's do that. My mom and dad, what they had to go through for my sister to get her career was nothing short of inspirational. But it was just, yeah, cool, we'll make that happen, because they're those kind of people. So perspective is probably the biggest thing, but you only get that from what your environment is. And I'm very lucky that both, in my family now with my husband and my children, but also with my parents and my sister and my brother, I know how lucky I am in what I found.
Amazing. I am going to have to bring this to a close. I feel like we'll be here all afternoon. You're a busy woman. Sideline 7, same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, what's your favourite quote?
One that my brother actually came up with, which was life is for living. So it's really simple. We used to have this actually on this wall here. Before we did up our house, we had all these photos. If I'm sure it's probably still on my Instagram, people will see it at some stage. But like we had all these mixed tiles, and it was like literally photographs from our whole life. But in the middle of it, we just had life is for living. And that's what he used to say all the time. We'd be like, right, will I go to this or not? I'm not sure. And he'd be like, come on, life is for living. Like, and every time he'd say it, we'd all be like, yep, you're absolutely right. So now all the time when I'm faced with will I, won't I, we always say it in the house. We have it out there in the hallway as well. It's just life is for living. Let's go. And so I very rarely, unless I can't, I would very rarely say no. I'm always just like, right, life is for living. Let's go. Let's do it. And it's back to the perspective thing, but life is for living is definitely the quote that means the most to me.
Brilliant. This is probably the most excited, or the question I wanted to ask you the most, and I was so excited to ask. I ask everyone, what's the best sporting event you've been to? I'll split that into kind of 3 for you. Best one you've been part of as a player or coach, but then I want to have top 5 you've worked in, because I think maybe the top one might be a bit difficult, or maybe you do have an answer.
I think the Women's World Cup I worked on, and I got to go to a game, and it was amazing because of watching what it had become over the years. And then in 2023, seeing Ireland get to a level like that, where just, for us to have dreamed that Ireland could ever be in a major tournament, that's got to be right up there, I think. I probably like Olympics are always going to be up there as the the pinnacle of everything that you go to. I think London to me felt like it was just special for a lot of reasons. And I probably, because it was the first one and because of Katie Taylor's moment of her crown and glory, I think that probably would sit up there as something that will never be beaten in terms of something to go to. So I definitely have London in there. I was actually at Katie Taylor's fight against Amanda Serrano in Madison Square Garden, and I still to this day, it'll be one of the greatest sporting spectacles I have ever been to in my whole life. The whole city was behind it. It was incredible. Um, the Rugby World Cup, I thought, again, being given the keys to something like that and being given the opportunity to work on something that many people are involved in was definitely something really, really special that I still, for the life of me, don't understand how this is my job, that's the one. And then the biggest one of all, definitely, that I've worked on was the Paris Olympics. It just, for some reason, we always said, oh, London will never be beaten, it'll never be beaten. But it was, not only because it was the most successful Olympics ever for Ireland, which was always going to have its own sort of thing, but those 7 medals in 7 days, I just don't think there's a moment in Irish history that you'll ever have something like that. Like I landed in Paris the night that Mona McSherry won that first bronze medal because I'd been doing up for the match, and myself and Des, Shane Larry was on our flight. We got off in the baggage hall. We were there watching it on our phones. And like from the moment we got there, it was just like bang, 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 bang. This just incredible success that for as long as I live, I will be privileged to have been there and have to get to cover some of those, which were incredible. Like Reese's gold medal, I was there, just being able to be one of the first people to see him in those things was class. And then being involved as a player or coach, it's hard to pinpoint because a lot of it is tied up in when you win and when you don't win. So like playing playing for your country is probably, one of those that like standing there on the line, whether it's at a European Championships or Four Nations or whatever it is, standing there singing your anthem is probably one of the proudest feelings you'll ever have. So like that feeling never goes away, whether it's playing internationally or playing for your county. There's probably just so many of them. And then the other sporting spectacle, my favorite sporting event I've ever been to, I wasn't working at it, but I went to the Super Bowl in 2013 and it was just outrageous. Like if anybody ever has an opportunity to go to a Super Bowl, I would say go embrace it. And it is just such a carnival of sport. And like that, the entertainment value, as much as the sport, is important. Like they hardly even focus on the football. It's all about like who's playing, who's doing this, who's doing that. But it was just outrageous crack. And yeah, I loved it. It was in New Orleans as well. So it was lots of fun. And I'd done my internship not too far from there. So there was a load of my mates there and everything. And it was just such a brilliant time. But I'll definitely get to another Super Bowl, that's for sure. If I could work on one of them before my career is out, that'd be great.
I was going to say, working a Super Bowl and maybe March Madness someday.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Listen, I went to March Madness when I was doing my internship in America, and it was the most incredible tournament just because of the way it whittles down from Sweet 16 as well, where you're just watching this unfold. And it's just a class tournament. I'd love if we had something like that here. It hasn't, basketball in Ireland, even though it's still on this massive growth trajectory, and certainly at school level, it's massive. We just don't have that level of anticipation around. Like you've got Super League finals, and like if you're into it, lots of people are talking about it and all. But if you're not, it does still pass a lot of the country by. Whereas in America, it seems like March Madness, people only start watching it at that stage. But it's it's a class tournament, that's for sure. We'd love to work at that at some point too.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to ask how close was Paris to London, because I've heard people say London will never be surpassed, but they hadn't been to Paris.
London was incredible, right? It really was just amazing because of the success that we had, and because it was like such a close games. It was almost like a home games. But actually, Paris surpassed it to me. There was a couple of things. One was the success of the Irish athletes. Two was because we'd had COVID games before it, everybody was so much more open to accessibility. Like any interview you wanted, you pretty much got it. The access we got to athletes was just unprecedented. And then the other thing was the Champions Parade. It was just so cool. It was better for the fans. Like they got the ability to actually really celebrate with the athletes and be in it. And Paris is just a really cool city. But I thought the way it had evolved in those 12 years was significant. I thought Paris was right up there.
Was there, can you pick a particular moment from Paris?
Kelly's goal was pretty special as well. Yeah, I think just knowing the pressure she was under to deliver and that she did it was probably similar to what Katie might have felt in London, because lots of people already had the gold medal around her neck. And just the relief for her, and how she, you know, even singing Grace and being just there surrounded by her family and some really, really close people to her, was a really special moment in Irish sport, because I think a lot of people knew this is the end as well. So she got the fairy tale moment that a lot of sports people don't get. And it was lovely to be there for that.
Yeah, as you say, it's not something that I was always there.
Yeah,
That fairy tale
totally.
sent off.
Totally.
Yeah. Question 3: biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Definitely not getting the Sunday game to me still is the one, that first time round, where like I said, I felt I was ready for it, but other people decided I wasn't. And that's fine. Like ultimately, we all have to move on from that. The hardest part was, at the time, I couldn't see a future for me in RTE. I couldn't see that there was anything there for me. All the other chairs were occupied by other people. I thought it was going to be a very long time before an opportunity would come up again. And I really nearly left. I considered leaving, was offered multiples of jobs, and was very close to walking out the door. Only a few people talked me into staying and showed me that there was a plan. So there was definitely a lot of soul searching in that time, and a lot of considering, can I do this? Am I, is this the right thing for me? Should I try to pursue something else? But I think the biggest lesson that I learned was being patient and understanding that just because this didn't happen doesn't mean the whole thing is over. There's lots of other ways you can get into this. There's other opportunities going to come. It was just very hard to see them at the time, and I probably needed those people to talk me into it, which is what happened.
On the flip side, then, your biggest achievement in or outside of sport?
Probably just doing what I do, honestly. I mean, as cliched as that sounds, it could have been a million other people. Like, there's no reason that it should have been me versus other people, apart from that work ethic, really. Like when we talk about timing, like I don't know how many other people applied for those jobs, but like I do remember before I got into RTE, I applied for a job in Ireland AM, I didn't get it. I applied for a sports reading job in Today FM, I didn't get it. So there was other opportunities where other people got those gigs and I didn't get them. But actually, when somebody saw something in me and they were giving me one opportunity, I worked incredibly hard to make sure that it wasn't just one. There was a next one and a next one and a next one. And then people saw she's really willing to put in the effort and she's going places. So to me, it's kind of like, how do you respond to that sort of thing? And that's probably the biggest achievement, that even with the no's, I found a way to do this and to achieve what was a dream and a million miles away from what I thought was possible, but actually just persevering and going, yeah, I can do that. I can get there, and that's probably what I'm most proud of.
Looking back, what advice would you give 18-year-old Jacqui walking around in a neck brace?
Yeah, I think I'd probably tell her, you're not going to believe what's coming. I think, you'd want to be seriously more than Mystic Meg now to have predicted that this is the way that life was going to pan out for you. But I think I'd probably just say, you're doing all the right things, like you're making good life decisions. And that's probably the thing that, like, when I say I don't have regrets, I really don't. It's because in a lot of those circumstances, I try to just say, well, what's the right thing here? What should I do? And then I based my decisions on logic and the reasons that were there in front of me. Like, and if I had all those back, I would do the same thing. So I would really just say to the 18-year-old, look, you're going to be grand. It'll be absolutely fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. And you should really, really prepare yourself for what incredible crack you're going to have over the next 20 years or so.
Yeah. Was there a particular moment in your career where maybe early on or maybe at any point where you kind of said, right, not that I've made it, but I'm good at this and I have an opportunity? Because there's a difference between I'm good at this and you didn't have an opportunity to, okay, I'm good at this, I'm in a chair. Not that I've made it, but I'm here.
Yeah, probably Euro 2016. I was given the highlights show with Aidan Power. And Ireland were in the Euros and Northern Ireland were also in the Euros. So RTE were going full throttle on trying to make sure that we covered it from all angles. And I had done the Olympics that summer and had kind of, I guess, like sort of said, like, I'm going to be on two big things or whatever. But then they offered me the Euros as well and said, look, do you want to do this? But we'd never really done a highlights show like that. But it was the first time where we were able to have the crack, because Aidan Power is a good laugh as well. And he's a brilliant presenter. And I had started out with him years ago because he was presenting TTV when I was coming through as the sports correspondent or whatever. So we had like a really good relationship. We were really relaxed and chatty and casual with each other. But it was all very off the cuff. It was like, right, we're going to go to highlights here, then we're going to have a chat. And then we had a keepy uppy challenge. The pundits had come in. And it was all really more soccer AM than kind of bulletin reading and serious stuff. And I was obviously working in the newsroom at the time as well. So it was a lot like less serious. And it probably was the first time where on screen in a sporting environment, I was seen as somebody who could be laid back and a bit of crack. And after that, everything changed for me. That's when everybody saw me and went, oh, there's something here. And that's probably the point at which I felt, okay, this is actually going somewhere now, because they're starting to see you on screen for who you are. Up to that, I had been seen as very, go on there, read the sports bulletins, do this. You're good on camera, but you're structured, and this is what it was. Whereas when I showed them, hey, listen, I'm a bit looser than you think I am here, that's when they realized, oh, we can do something more with this. And maybe you can work in the entertainment department. You don't just have to work in sport, and there's other things and other opportunities for you. So that was probably the biggest one. Yeah.
Brilliant. Question 6, who would be your dream dinner guest and why? And you can open up the table to be a dinner party if you want.
Do you know what? I've always admired Becky Hammon. I think like she probably carved a niche in a way that it's hard to be a female coach, particularly when you are in an environment that is still very male dominated. But because of her career, both as a player, but also as an assistant coach, and how she sort of found her feet at a table where it wasn't always easy, and particularly in some of those environments, I think she's always spoken incredibly well, but has always brought a lot of people along with her. Like Dawn Staley would have been a lot like that as well, where she would have made sure that she's pulling other coaches along with her, and she's doing a really good job of that. And I think that's, to me, people like that, I would be fascinated by their insights in terms of what have they learned over the years, where are, I guess, the potential pitfalls and that kind of thing. So somebody like that. And then if I could have one more guest who's not a sports person, I would invite Adele, because if I could be friends with somebody who's in the music industry, it would be her. I would love to go for a glass of wine with her, because I think she is the ultimate crack. She looks like she is the same person. Like I've seen her in concert. She's the same person on the stage as she is off it. By the looks of it, she looks like she'd be ultimate crack, and would love to go out with her for a night.
Yeah, brilliant answer, because I love that clip of the Irish woman.
Yeah, I was at that. I was at that gig. Your one, Paula on the Prosecco, God love her. Her poor husband was like, oh, Jesus. But it was hilarious crack. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you make a great point with, a female coach. And I think going back to integration, we can have, with your first female neurosurgeon and Catherine Moore, and people might have seen her on Brain Doctors, we still don't have a female intercounty manager in the men's game.
I know, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like at some point it's coming.
Yeah. Absolutely. I do have to bring this to a close. We've been sitting here for 2 hours, Jacqui. I'm so sorry. Yeah. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
I'd probably call it Enjoying the Moment, because I think you have to get to the stage where you feel you're satisfied. And like I said earlier, like there's going to come a point, I mean, sooner or later, when they decide we've had enough. You're done. This gig is over. We're moving on to somebody else. If that happens, and when that happens, I'll be like, okay, cool. I've had a blast. Like I've absolutely loved it. But it's because I can do that now. I'm very content with what I have. I really enjoy it. I probably spent the early part of my career chasing things all the time. And it's very hard when you don't have those things to see the wood for the trees, because you're like, I want it. And particularly in the media industry, you're wondering, why do other people have the gigs that I want to have? Whereas now I have the gigs that lots of people want to have. So they're asking me, how do I get that? How do I get that? How do I get that? But it allows me to go, if this is such a coveted thing and you have it, then you better appreciate it, because when it's gone, you're going to miss it. And these will have been some of the best years of my life, but I'm kind of smart enough to realize that and to enjoy it for what it is, because when it is gone, then I can look back and say, yeah, that was fantastic. But that doesn't mean you can only do that then. You need to be able to do that now, so that every day that I'm there, I am getting the maximum out of it, because I'm enjoying the moment. So that's definitely what I'm doing.
Amazing. Well, Jacqui, thanks so much for the time. Much appreciated.
No bother.
I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in the next couple of months.
Thanks a million.